As we age, preserving muscle strength, especially in our legs, becomes one of the most important factors for staying independent, preventing falls, and living longer, healthier lives. But here's the surprising truth. Certain fruits, often marketed as healthy, may actually be sabotaging your leg strength. It's not that fruits are bad, far from it, but some of them carry hidden pitfalls for seniors, from blood sugar spikes to mineral imbalances that weaken muscles over time. Today, I'll walk you through 7 of the worst fruits for leg strength and the 5 key reasons why avoiding or limiting them can protect your mobility and overall health. When we talk about aging and muscle health, the conversation often focuses on protein intake, resistance training, and maybe even supplements like creatine or vitamin D. Yet, one of the most overlooked and perhaps most destructive forces undermining our muscle strength as we age is something as simple as the roller coaster ride of blood sugar spikes and crashes. These sudden surges in glucose don't just affect your weight or your risk of diabetes, they directly attack your muscle health, especially in the legs, which carry the burden of mobility and independence in older age. Let's break this down, because the mechanism is both fascinating and deeply concerning. When you consume fruits that are particularly high in natural sugars, like overripe bananas, mangoes, or seedless grapes, your body rapidly absorbs that sugar, causing a sharp rise in blood glucose. Now, under normal circumstances, your pancreas responds by releasing insulin to move that glucose into your cells for energy or storage. But here's where the problem begins. As we age, our cells become less responsive to insulin. This condition, called insulin resistance, doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, silently, as a result of years of high-sugar diets, sedentary lifestyles, and yes, repeated exposure to these glucose surges. The muscle cells in your legs are among the largest glucose sinks in your body. They need energy to contract, to stabilize you when you stand, to propel you when you walk. But when insulin resistance sets in, those same muscle cells become less efficient at pulling glucose from the bloodstream. Over time, 2 dangerous things happen simultaneously. Glucose lingers in the blood, leading to higher average blood sugar levels, and the muscles receive less energy to maintain themselves. It's like cutting off fuel to a machine while flooding the surrounding area with toxic runoff. Chronic high glucose does more than just starve muscles of energy. It triggers inflammation, damages blood vessels, and impairs the function of mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses inside each cell. Mitochondria are particularly important for muscle health because they produce the ATP molecules that power muscle contraction. When mitochondrial function declines, muscles fatigue more quickly, repair themselves more slowly, and gradually shrink in size and strength. Studies have repeatedly shown this connection. A 2021 paper in Frontiers in Endocrinology examined older adults with elevated fasting glucose levels and found a clear, measurable decline in muscle strength over time. It wasn't just about muscle mass. Even when size remained relatively stable, the quality and function of the muscle fibers deteriorated. Think of it this way. You could have the same amount of muscle tissue, but if the mitochondria inside those muscles are damaged, the strength output plummets. The tissue is there, but it's underpowered, like a car with an engine running on 2 cylinders instead of 6. And here's the real kicker. Leg muscles, being some of the largest in the body, are hit hardest. When they weaken, everything suffers. Balance, walking speed, the ability to climb stairs, even the capacity to stand from a chair unassisted. These may seem like simple daily tasks, but in aging research, they are critical indicators of independence and longevity. Mobility is life. Lose it and risks of falls, hospitalization, and early mortality rise sharply. Now, some might say, but fruits are natural. They can't be as harmful as processed sugars. That's partly true. Whole fruits bring along fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants that processed sweets lack. But the problem arises when certain fruits, especially the ones bred for hyper-sweetness in modern agriculture, deliver huge loads of glucose and fructose in a single serving. Our ancestors never ate grapes the size of golf balls or mangoes with sugar contents rivaling candy. What happens metabolically after repeated glucose spikes is a process called glycation. Excess sugar molecules start binding to proteins in your body, forming harmful compounds known as advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These AGEs accumulate in tissues, stiffening blood vessels, thickening connective tissue, and yes, interfering with muscle elasticity and repair. Over years, glycation acts like a slow rusting process inside your body, aging you from within. And it doesn't stop there. High glucose also drives the production of reactive oxygen species, essentially cellular exhaust fumes that damage DNA, proteins, and lipids. This oxidative stress overwhelms the body's natural defense systems, further injuring mitochondria and accelerating aging in muscle fibers. Research has even shown that oxidative stress impairs the activation of satellite cells, the stem-like cells responsible for muscle regeneration. If these cells don't activate properly after stress or injury, your muscles lose the capacity to repair and rebuild themselves. For older adults, that means one bad fall or illness can lead to irreversible declines in strength. Another layer to this problem is the link between insulin resistance and chronic, low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging in longevity research. High sugar intake increases inflammatory cytokines in the bloodstream, which interfere with muscle protein synthesis, the process your body uses to build and maintain muscle fibers. So not only are you losing energy efficiency in your muscles, but you're also impairing their ability to recover and grow stronger after exercise or daily wear and tear. Interestingly, interventions that stabilize blood sugar, like intermittent fasting, low glycemic diets, or simply choosing fruits lower in sugar, show remarkable benefits for muscle health. When blood glucose levels stay steady, inflammation drops, mitochondrial function improves, and muscles regain some of their youthful responsiveness to insulin. Even modest reductions in average blood sugar, measured as HbA1c, correlate with stronger grip strength, faster walking speeds, and better balance in older adults. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means being strategic about fruit choices. Berries, for instance, provide antioxidants with minimal sugar load. Kiwi and grapefruit offer vitamin C without sending glucose soaring. Pairing fruit with protein or healthy fats, like a handful of nuts, also slows sugar absorption, blunting those damaging spikes. Timing matters too. Eating high-sugar fruits on an empty stomach creates a sharper glucose surge than having them after a balanced meal. The goal here isn't to demonize fruit, but to align our diets with our aging physiology. After 60, our muscles are fighting uphill battles against time, inflammation, and metabolic decline. Giving them stable energy, rather than chaotic sugar highs and lows, is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to protect strength and independence. Because at the end of the day, preserving leg strength isn't just about looking fit. It's about keeping the freedom to move, to live on your own terms, to walk into your later decades with power in every step. And that begins with something as deceptively small as the kind of fruit on your plate and the glucose wave it sends through your body. When we talk about sugar and aging, most people think about glucose because it's the primary sugar circulating in our blood. But there's another sugar hiding in plain sight that can be even more damaging for muscle health as we grow older: fructose. This sugar is found naturally in fruit but has very different metabolic effects from glucose. And when consumed in excess, especially from certain high fructose fruits, it can wreak silent havoc on your muscles, particularly in the legs, where strength and endurance are so critical for independence in aging. Let's start with the basic difference. Glucose is metabolized throughout the body. Your muscles, brain, and other organs use it directly for energy. Fructose, on the other hand, takes a one-way trip straight to your liver for processing. That might not sound like a big deal, but this detour through the liver changes everything. Unlike glucose, which triggers insulin release and gets stored as glycogen in muscles, fructose largely bypasses these control systems. When the liver is flooded with too much fructose, especially from sweet fruits like watermelon, dates, or mangoes, it converts the excess into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. This fat accumulation in the liver, known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, is strongly linked to insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and impaired energy metabolism. For older adults, the chain reaction doesn't stop there. Insulin resistance in the liver spills over into the muscles, reducing their ability to absorb glucose efficiently. Over time, your muscles become energy deprived even while your blood sugar stays high. It's a metabolic double hit: too much fat in the liver, too little energy in the muscles. And here's where it gets even more concerning. Fructose metabolism creates uric acid as a byproduct. High uric acid levels have long been associated with gout. But newer research reveals that uric acid also contributes to oxidative stress inside mitochondria. Those tiny mitochondria are the engines that power every muscle contraction in your legs. When oxidative stress damages them, the engines sputter, energy production drops, and muscles tire more easily. It's no coincidence that studies show people with elevated uric acid often have reduced muscle strength and greater risk of frailty as they age. A 2020 paper in Nutrients noted that uric acid-induced oxidative stress directly impairs mitochondrial biogenesis, the process by which cells create new, healthy mitochondria. Without this renewal process, your muscles lose both endurance and resilience. But the damage from fructose doesn't end with mitochondrial stress. Excess fructose promotes the formation of advanced glycation end products, AGEs, harmful molecules created when sugars bind to proteins in your body. These AGEs accumulate in tissues, making them stiff, less elastic, and prone to inflammation. In muscles, AGEs interfere with the structural proteins needed for strength and flexibility. Imagine pouring sticky syrup into the gears of a machine. That's what AGEs do at the microscopic level. They literally age your tissues from the inside out, and the higher the sugar exposure, the faster this happens. One of the lesser-known consequences of high fructose intake is its effect on muscle protein synthesis, the process by which your body repairs and builds muscle fibers. Research in aging populations shows that after exercise or protein intake, older muscles already have a blunted response. They don't build new muscle as efficiently as younger muscles. Add fructose overload to the mix, and this anabolic resistance worsens. The muscle tissue doesn't respond as well to the very signals meant to keep it strong. Over decades, this contributes to sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass and strength that robs so many older adults of mobility and independence. Fructose also seems to have a unique effect on appetite and fat storage. Unlike glucose, it doesn't trigger the same satiety hormones like leptin that tell your brain you've eaten enough. This means high fructose foods may actually encourage overeating, leading to sarcopenic obesity where fat mass increases even as muscle mass declines. This combination is particularly dangerous because excess fat tissue produces inflammatory chemicals called cytokines, which directly accelerate muscle breakdown. In other words, the more fat you gain from fructose-driven overeating, the more inflammation your muscles are exposed to, creating a vicious cycle of weakness and weight gain. For the legs, this is devastating. These muscles are your largest, most metabolically active tissues. They burn the most energy, stabilize your body, and protect you from falls. When they lose strength, everything becomes harder, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, even standing up from a chair. Weak legs aren't just an inconvenience. They're one of the strongest predictors of loss of independence and early mortality in older adults. And high fructose fruits, consumed in excess, quietly accelerate this decline. Now, does this mean all fructose is bad? Not necessarily in small amounts, especially when wrapped in the fiber and phytonutrients of whole fruits. Fructose isn't inherently toxic. The problem comes with dose and context. A handful of berries with their modest fructose content poses little risk and brings antioxidants that fight aging. But large servings of tropical fruits, fruit juices, or dried fruits deliver massive fructose loads with minimal fiber to slow absorption. Fruit juice deserves special mention here. Even 100% natural juice concentrates fructose and removes the fiber matrix that normally slows down sugar release in the gut. Drinking a glass of orange juice, for example, delivers the sugar of several oranges in seconds, something our metabolism never evolved to handle. Studies show that people who regularly consume fruit juice, even without added sugars, have higher rates of insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, and metabolic syndrome compared to those who eat whole fruits in moderation. So what's the solution for protecting muscle health as you age? First, choose low fructose fruits like berries, kiwi, and citrus in moderate amounts rather than tropical fruits like mangoes, pineapples, or dates. Second, avoid fruit juices and dried fruits, both of which concentrate sugar and eliminate the natural water and fiber that help regulate absorption. Third, pair fruits with protein or healthy fats like Greek yogurt or a handful of nuts to blunt the blood sugar and fructose surge. Finally, timing matters. Having fruit after a balanced meal rather than on an empty stomach slows down sugar absorption and reduces the metabolic shock to your liver and muscles. Small changes like this, repeated daily, can protect mitochondrial health, reduce oxidative stress, and preserve the strength and endurance of your legs for years to come. Because in the end, aging well isn't just about living longer, it's about walking strongly into each new decade, climbing stairs without fear, standing tall and independent. And that begins with giving your muscles the metabolic environment they need to thrive, not flooding them with the silent, sugar-driven stress of excess fructose. One of the less obvious but increasingly important connections between diet and muscle health lies in something few people think about: the acid-base balance in the body. We often hear about vitamins, protein, or antioxidants when talking about aging well, but maintaining a healthy pH balance inside our tissues turns out to be just as critical, especially for preserving muscle strength in the legs as we grow older. And this is where certain fruits, despite their reputation for being healthy, can actually work against you when consumed in excess. Fruits like oranges, tangerines, pineapples, and even some varieties of plums and cherries are considered acid-forming foods once metabolized. This doesn't mean they're acidic in the mouth. It means that after digestion, the metabolic byproducts they leave in the body increase, what researchers call the dietary acid load. Over time, when the diet tilts too far toward acid-forming foods, without enough alkalizing vegetables and minerals to counterbalance it, the body is forced to maintain pH balance by pulling alkaline reserves, mainly calcium and magnesium, from bones and muscles. This matters enormously for muscle health, particularly in aging. Calcium and magnesium are not only structural minerals for bones, they are also essential for muscle contraction and relaxation. Every time you take a step, climb stairs, or even stand up from a chair, calcium floods into muscle cells to trigger contraction, while magnesium helps the muscle fibers relax afterward. Without enough of these minerals, muscles become weaker, more fatigued, and prone to cramping. Aging already creates a perfect storm for mineral loss. Kidney function declines, so the body becomes less efficient at clearing acids. Hormonal shifts, especially after menopause in women, accelerate calcium loss from bones and muscles. Combine this with decades of acidic diets, processed foods, high animal protein, and yes, certain fruits, and you set the stage for both osteoporosis and sarcopenia, the twin threats of weak bones and weak muscles. Research supports this connection. Clearly, a 2020 review in the journal Nutrients examined dozens of studies on dietary acid load and musculoskeletal health. The findings were striking. Older adults with diets producing higher acid loads consistently had lower muscle mass, poorer leg function, and higher rates of frailty. Conversely, those consuming more alkalizing foods, like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, and low-sugar fruits, retained more muscle strength and had better mobility scores well into old age. The mechanism goes beyond simple mineral loss. When calcium and magnesium are pulled from tissues to buffer dietary acids, the resulting mineral depletion disrupts mitochondrial function inside muscle cells. Remember, mitochondria depend on magnesium for ATP production, the energy currency of the cell. Without enough magnesium, energy output falls, muscles fatigue faster, and recovery after exertion slows dramatically. For the legs, which carry your body weight and generate the power for walking and climbing, this energy deficit is devastating over time. What's more, chronic low-grade acidosis, even mild, activates proteolytic pathways in muscle tissue. In simpler terms, the body starts breaking down muscle proteins to free up glutamine, an amino acid used by the kidneys to neutralize acid. It's a survival mechanism: protect blood pH at all costs, even if it means sacrificing muscle. In young people, the body can compensate, but in older adults with already declining muscle mass, this acid-driven breakdown accelerates weakness and frailty. You might be wondering, aren't fruits supposed to be healthy because of their vitamins and antioxidants? And that's true when chosen wisely and eaten in balance. The problem arises when older adults, often trying to eat healthy, consume large amounts of acidic fruits, like oranges or pineapples, every day, without enough alkalizing vegetables or mineral-rich foods to offset the acid load. Over years, this subtle imbalance erodes both bone density and muscle function, especially in the legs where strength determines independence. Another overlooked issue is the interaction between acidity and vitamin D metabolism. Vitamin D is essential for calcium absorption and muscle function. Studies show that chronic metabolic acidosis reduces the activity of vitamin D, further impairing calcium balance and weakening both bones and muscles. So the acid load doesn't just steal minerals directly, it also sabotages the hormones and vitamins needed to use those minerals effectively. Fortunately, the solution isn't to eliminate fruits altogether, but to be strategic. First, focus on low-acid, low-sugar fruits like berries, kiwi, and melons, which have a more alkaline effect once metabolized. Second, always pair fruits with plenty of vegetables, legumes, and mineral-rich foods like leafy greens, almonds, and seeds to neutralize dietary acids. Third, staying well hydrated helps the kidneys flush out excess acids, reducing the need to leach minerals from tissues. Some researchers even suggest simple tests like urinary pH as a rough indicator of acid-base balance in older adults. Diets shown to raise urinary pH toward the alkaline side, meaning lower acid load, consistently correlate with better muscle performance, faster walking speeds, and stronger grip strength in seniors. So when we look at the bigger picture of aging, mobility, and longevity, acid-base balance emerges as a silent but powerful player. A diet heavy in acid-forming fruits may seem harmless in the short term, but over decades it chips away at the very minerals and cellular energy systems. Your muscles need to stay strong. Leg strength, more than almost any other physical trait, predicts independence in aging. It determines whether you can carry groceries, get up from the floor, or avoid dangerous falls. Protecting that strength means protecting the cellular environment your muscles live in, keeping it rich in minerals, low in chronic acidity, and supportive of mitochondrial energy production. In the end, aging well isn't just about adding years to life, but adding life to years. That means standing tall, walking confidently, and moving freely through the decades ahead. And it turns out the acid-base balance, influenced by something as simple as fruit choices, can make the difference between strength and frailty in the years when mobility matters most. When we talk about aging and muscle health, we often focus on nutrition, exercise, or perhaps even advanced longevity compounds. Yet there's a silent factor affecting muscle strength that almost no one thinks about: pesticide residues on fruits. For decades, fruits have been bred and grown on an industrial scale to meet global demand, and with that has come heavy reliance on pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. While these chemicals protect crops from insects and disease, many remain on the fruit we eat even after washing. And a growing body of evidence suggests that for older adults, especially those trying to preserve muscle strength and mobility, these residues may quietly erode health at the cellular level. Here's why this matters so much for aging muscles, particularly the legs. Our leg muscles are among the most metabolically active tissues in the body. They require constant energy production from mitochondria, the tiny organelles inside cells, often referred to as the powerhouses of the cell. Every time you walk, climb stairs, or rise from a chair, your leg muscles demand bursts of ATP, the cellular energy currency produced by mitochondria. The problem is that many pesticides have been shown to act as mitochondrial toxins. They disrupt the electron transport chain, the very system inside mitochondria that converts nutrients into energy. When pesticides damage this system, two things happen. Less ATP is produced, and more reactive oxygen species, essentially harmful free radicals, are generated. This combination means the muscle cells are both starved of energy and exposed to higher oxidative stress, accelerating aging at the cellular level. Over time, mitochondria themselves become damaged, leading to a vicious cycle. Damaged mitochondria produce less energy and more free radicals, which then damage the remaining mitochondria even further. For older adults, this mitochondrial decline is catastrophic. Muscle tissue naturally loses mitochondria with age, a process called mitochondrial dysfunction that researchers like myself have studied for years in the context of aging and longevity. When pesticides accelerate this decline, the result is reduced muscle strength, slower recovery after activity, and increased fatigue. In practical terms, this means the legs, responsible for mobility, balance, and independence, grow weaker faster. Several studies highlight this connection. Research in toxicology letters has shown that chronic, low-dose exposure to certain pesticides impairs mitochondrial function in muscle tissue, even when overall exposure levels are considered safe by regulatory standards. Another paper in Environmental Health Perspectives linked pesticide exposure to reduced physical performance in older agricultural workers who experienced higher rates of muscle weakness and walking impairment compared to those with minimal exposure. These findings suggest that even at levels far below acute toxicity, pesticides create a metabolic burden on muscle cells that worsens with age. There's also an inflammatory component. Many pesticides activate inflammatory pathways in the body, increasing levels of cytokines like TNF-alpha and IL-6. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, is already a major driver of muscle loss and frailty in older adults. When pesticide residues add fuel to this fire, the result is even faster breakdown of muscle proteins and slower muscle repair after exercise or injury. Another layer of complexity comes from the fact that pesticides often accumulate in fatty tissues. As we age, changes in body composition, less muscle, more fat, mean that these chemicals may linger longer in the body, releasing slowly over time and creating prolonged exposure even after dietary intake stops. This long-term, low-level release keeps oxidative stress and inflammation simmering in the background, impairing the muscle-building machinery for years. Some pesticides also interfere with mitochondrial biogenesis, the process by which cells create new mitochondria in healthy muscle. Especially after exercise, cells respond by building more mitochondria to meet future energy demands. This is one reason exercise improves endurance and strength. It literally upgrades your cellular power plants. But studies have shown that certain pesticides blunt this adaptive response, meaning muscles lose not only existing mitochondrial function, but also the ability to replace what's lost. For older adults fighting to maintain mobility, this is like trying to run a city with fewer and fewer power stations coming online each year. So what can be done? First, it's important to understand which fruits carry the highest pesticide residues. The Environmental Working Group publishes an annual list called the Dirty Dozen, which often includes fruits like strawberries, apples, grapes, and peaches at the top. For seniors concerned about muscle health and overall longevity, choosing organic versions of these fruits, or at least washing and peeling them carefully, can significantly reduce pesticide intake. Second, dietary choices can help mitigate some of the damage. Nutrients like polyphenols from berries, vitamin C from citrus, and sulforaphane from cruciferous vegetables have been shown to support mitochondrial health and reduce oxidative stress. Including these in the diet provides a counterbalance to unavoidable exposures, strengthening the body's natural antioxidant defenses. Third, supporting the body's own detoxification systems becomes more important with age. The liver and kidneys handle most of the chemical clearance in the body, but both decline in efficiency over time. Staying hydrated, consuming enough dietary fiber, and maintaining a healthy gut microbiome all aid in the elimination of toxins, including pesticide residues. Some studies even suggest that compounds like N-acetylcysteine, NAC, and alpha-lipoic acid may help protect mitochondria from environmental toxins, though these should be discussed with a healthcare professional before use. Ultimately, the goal isn't to create fear around eating fruit. Fruits remain important sources of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. Rather, it's about being strategic, choosing organic when possible, varying fruit choices to reduce repeated exposure to the same chemicals, and supporting the body's resilience through nutrient-dense foods and lifestyle habits. Because preserving leg strength into your 70s, 80s, and beyond isn't just about exercise or protein intake, it's also about protecting the very cellular machinery that powers every step you take. And avoiding or minimizing pesticide residues is one small but powerful way to keep those cellular power plants running smoothly for decades to come. When we think about aging well, we often hear advice to eat more fruits. And for good reason. Fruits provide fiber, vitamins, antioxidants, and phytonutrients that protect against chronic disease. But there's a paradox that becomes increasingly important as we age. Too much of certain types of fruit, especially dried and processed forms, can tip the balance towards sarcopenic obesity, a condition where muscle mass declines while fat mass silently creeps upward. For older adults, this combination is far more dangerous than either obesity or muscle loss alone. It accelerates weakness, frailty, and loss of independence, especially when it affects the legs, the foundation of mobility. Let's break down why this happens. As fruits are dried or processed into juices, jams, or snacks, the natural water and much of the fiber are removed, leaving behind a concentrated source of sugar and calories. A handful of raisins or dates may seem small, but it can deliver the same sugar load as a can of soda. The difference is that people rarely perceive dried fruits as sweets. They're marketed as health foods, so it's easy to overeat them, especially when they come in bite-sized, convenient packages. For aging muscles, this calorie-dense sugar bomb creates two problems. First, excess sugar drives insulin resistance, the same metabolic dysfunction we see with high-fructose fruits and processed carbohydrates. Muscles become less efficient at taking in glucose for energy, while the pancreas keeps pumping out insulin to compensate. Over time, high insulin levels promote fat storage, especially around the abdomen and within muscle tissue itself, a phenomenon called intramuscular fat infiltration. This is where sarcopenic obesity begins. The fat doesn't just sit there harmlessly, it actively secretes inflammatory molecules called cytokines that damage muscle proteins and mitochondria. Think of it as a low-grade fire smoldering inside your muscle tissue, slowly degrading strength and endurance. A 2019 study in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia and Muscle found that older adults with sarcopenic obesity had nearly double the risk of disability and falls compared to those with muscle loss alone. It's the combination too little muscle, too much fat that accelerates frailty. Another problem with dried and processed fruits is the lack of satiety signals. Whole fruits contain water and fiber that slow digestion and stretch the stomach, signaling fullness to the brain. Take those elements away, and you're left with a product that delivers sugar rapidly but doesn't make you feel full. That's why it's easy to eat 20 dried apricots without realizing you've consumed the sugar equivalent of several full-sized peaches. For older adults with slowing metabolisms, this chronic overconsumption adds hundreds of extra calories per day, most of which end up stored as fat rather than fueling muscles. As fat mass rises, muscle mass often declines in parallel because the same inflammatory cytokines that impair muscle function also interfere with muscle protein synthesis, the process of repairing and building new muscle fibers. This is critical because after age 60, the body already responds less efficiently to protein intake and resistance exercise. Scientists call this anabolic resistance. It means you need more stimulation, more protein, more strength training to get the same muscle-building effect you enjoyed when you were younger. Add the inflammatory burden of excess fat from dried fruit overconsumption, and the muscle-building machinery grinds even slower. There's also a mitochondrial dimension to this problem. Excess calories, especially from sugars, flood the mitochondria with more fuel than they can handle. When mitochondria are overwhelmed, they leak electrons that form reactive oxygen species, damaging mitochondrial DNA and proteins. Over time, this oxidative stress reduces mitochondrial number and efficiency. Since mitochondria power every muscle contraction in your legs, their decline means less strength, slower walking speed, and faster fatigue. The legs suffer disproportionately here because they carry the heaviest mechanical load in the body. They need enormous amounts of energy to maintain strength and balance. When mitochondrial capacity drops and inflammation rises, leg muscles lose both power and coordination. That's why studies consistently link sarcopenic obesity with slower gait speed, weaker grip strength, and higher fall risk in older adults. It's important to understand that this isn't just about appearance or body weight. Sarcopenic obesity often occurs even when the scale doesn't change dramatically. Muscle tissue is denser than fat, so as muscle mass declines and fat mass rises, body weight might stay the same or even decrease slightly. But functional capacity, the ability to climb stairs, carry groceries, or get up from a chair, erodes silently until one day a fall or hospitalization reveals how weak the body has become. So, what's the solution? First, limit dried and processed fruits to small, occasional portions rather than daily staples. A few raisins sprinkled on oatmeal is fine. A whole bag eaten mindlessly is not. Second, prioritize whole, fresh fruits with high water and fiber content, berries, kiwi, grapefruit, because they deliver nutrients with far less sugar per serving and trigger better satiety signals. Third, always pair fruit intake with protein or healthy fats. For example, apple slices with almond butter or berries with Greek yogurt slow sugar absorption, stabilize insulin levels, and provide the amino acids or fatty acids muscles need for repair and energy. This combination helps prevent the rapid glucose and insulin spikes that drive fat storage and muscle breakdown. Finally, integrate resistance exercise into daily life. Even simple bodyweight exercises like chair stands or resistance band routines signal muscles to stay active, burn glucose efficiently, and resist the inflammatory effects of excess fat. Research shows that combining dietary control with strength training dramatically improves outcomes in older adults with sarcopenic obesity, restoring both muscle mass and metabolic health. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to avoid obesity or preserve muscle in isolation. It's to maintain the power-to-weight ratio, enough muscle strength relative to body mass, to move confidently through life. Overeating dried and processed fruits tips this balance in the wrong direction, accelerating the very declines in mobility and independence we're trying to prevent. By choosing whole fruits wisely, controlling portions, and supporting muscles with protein and exercise, we can break the cycle of sarcopenic obesity and keep our legs strong for decades to come.